Hello and welcome to a new season of Conversations with Elizabeth Ellen Carter. Today's guest is the very wonderful Jude Knight. We're both Bluestocking bells together, and we have a new anthology coming out in May called Desperate Daughters. Now, this is a absolutely fascinating series of short stories because they're so deeply interconnected, because it's all about the one family, the Bigglesworth, and their extended family as well. And Jude's story is absolutely intriguing, with a hero that has a very unusual nickname. He's called Lord Cuckoo. Hi, Jude, and thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Elizabeth. I'm delighted to join you today. Thank you for inviting me.
Always a pleasure. Now, for anyone who's not been following us, and you guys should be, did you want to give an overview of the Desperate Daughters anthology?
Certainly. Desperate Daughters is about the widow and daughters of an earl who was anxious to have a son and never quite managed it. He had 5 wives. The 5th survived him and had a posthumous daughter, making 10 daughters in all. So they're all living together in poverty in a small cottage that belongs to the dowager, when an aunt offers them the opportunity for the older girls to have a season in York.
One thing I love about the series is the relationships of all of the characters. Tell us about and I've just gone a blank and I'm going to get her name wrong. No, she's not Charlotte, is
Chloe.
she? Chloe. I knew it began with a C. Sorry, Chloe.
Yeah, so many girls to remember. Chloe is the daughter by a previous marriage of wife number 4. So 2 of the daughters, the younger daughters, are half-sisters, and the rest are stepsisters of Chloe. She's also in York for the season, her brother having decided it was about time that she had her opportunity. They've now got out from under the thumb of a very controlling uncle. So Chloe, however, would rather stay home with her animals and read a book.
But
until she meets Dom.
She's such a gorgeous character with such a great heart. That's what I really love about Chloe, and her fondness for animals does get her into a little bit of trouble, doesn't it?
Well, she does tend to rescue them when they're in difficulties, and when she comes across a capuchin monkey that is about to be
dealt with
harshly by a group of villagers, she insists on rescuing the monkey, and it isn't until a few days later that she realizes that the reason the thief who owned the monkey had in fact kept a monkey is that he'd trained it to steal for him. The monkey is now, having transferred its loyalty to Chloe, brings her cufflinks and earrings and little bits of china and anything else it can get its thieving little hands on.
Naughty little monkey. But it's actually Chloe who is rescued initially, isn't she?
She is. She goes to a reform meeting with one of her stepsisters, Doro, who is Carolyn Warfield's heroine. And the reform meeting turns into a riot. So she manages to lose her monkey and is anxiously searching for it when a handsome young gentleman comes to her rescue. And this is Lord Diomedes, or Lord Dom, also known as Lord Cuckoo, because he was a cuckoo in his supposed father's nest.
that is a really interesting concept to explore too, because it goes to the issues of identity and where one's place is in the world. But Dom really distinguishes himself on the battlefield, doesn't he? He's quite the hero on the continent.
He's known to his troops as Lord Cuckoo Do or Die. He went overseas in a fine surge of wrath against the world in general, and didn't care what happened to him, but he cared very much what happened to his men. And over the years, he does acquire quite a few, quite a bit of attention from the powers that be for his bravery.
What did you
as
enjoy
well as a nickname?
What did you enjoy most about creating Chloe and Dom?
The original idea of the first character I started with was Dom. I liked the idea of exploring how it feels, that whole sense of not belonging, of thinking you belong and then finding out that you don't, is it forms such a huge fracture in a person's life. And I liked the idea of a character who was very successful, had proven himself in his profession, but that still had that underlying sense that he wasn't good enough, that he wasn't, that he didn't belong, because he was the youngest of 3 sons. And when he was 10, his father found out in a fight with his mother that in fact she had had an affair with someone else, and Dom was the result. And so the father named the child as well as his mother's lover in a divorce case, and Dom spent years being teased for it by his older brothers and at school. So that leaves the sense that you don't know who you are, I'm sure. So that was, so Dom was really interesting to me, but he was, but I also wanted to make this light, cheerful and funny. And so while that's happening, he's also, as I say, highly successful. So that when he finds someone who loves him as him, the wounds are not so deep that he's not able to heal. So that was important, I think.
And it's what I love about the dynamic between Chloe and Dom, that she brings out his lighter side, and he grounds her in a way that sort of, she reaches for the stars, but you need to have somebody to hold you to make that reach, and Dom is very much that character.
I very much enjoyed the because she doesn't have a lot of confidence herself, but she is still, she will go and do things because she thinks they're right, and then she will feel very embarrassed about them and worry about what people think. And having Dom to just accept her as she is and support her, rescue her monkey from a tree, stop him from, or her, the monkey, she thought she gave a boy's name to, but she turned out to be a girl. Stop her from stealing a hat pin from the hat of the lady in front. All of these things that Dom does just without comment and without any sense that it's difficult.
And that's part of his purpose too, which he enjoys. It's what he does.
He finds the monkey very funny and enjoys everything that happens.
But there are moments of drama as well when Chloe is heading up to the house via the laneway behind the shambles, and there are ne'er-do-wells setting who are going to set upon her, but there was this real swashbuckling urbanity to Dom in that scene that I just fell in love with.
Oh, I'm so glad. Yes, he really he didn't want to. He didn't. He could see that it was pretty much on a knife edge. He could go. It could go either direction. There were far too many people for him to fight if they all decided to. But if he could get one of them, the worst of them, taking him on singly, he was pretty sure he could get Chloe out of there without any damage. And he did that using humor and it wasn't hurt by the fact that one of them recognized him as Lord Cuckoo, do or die Cuckoo. So yes, he did his best to quell the situation while also throwing titles around so that people would realize they were biting off more than they could chew.
Indeed. One of the fun things about Desperate Daughters, as I said, is the interconnectedness of the characters. How do you approach writing, knowing that there are going to be common elements and common characters working their way through your story as well?
I particularly love writing these expanded worlds where other people's characters wander through my story and mine wander through theirs. What the system we've evolved over time is that we work out fairly early on who knows whom, and as we map our stories, we realize there are going to be joint scenes. Sometimes we'll actually sit down and write those together, and we have a storytelling space on Facebook that works quite well for someone to write a line of dialogue or a piece of action, and the person whose other character is involved then writes theirs, and so on, until sometimes we've done 3 or 4 way scenes that have worked that way. Sometimes over the years, as we've begun to know the kind of character that one another writes, we can actually write someone else's scene and send it to them and say, I've got Doro or Chloe or whoever it might be saying this. Is that all right? Is this the kind of thing she would say and do? So it's that kind of first draft work that helps. And I played this role in this particular box set. It's important to have someone who reads all the stories and picks up disconnections.
Yes, yeah, that sort of mistress of the universe in that sense.
Yes, I have the power.
I mean, writing generally can be a rather solitary profession, because the world that you're creating exists between your ears.
Yes.
So to then open that up with a bunch of other authors to let these characters play on a stage for you all to see, to work out the character developments, to work out particular events on which other authors can add their characters and perhaps sort of, I think it really strengthens the world building. That's what I've really enjoyed about Desperate Daughters, is there's a full richness in not only in the characterization and the plot, but also the setting too. I think York really does have a central role to play in this series.
And it was really helpful that several of us, you were one of them, Elizabeth, gave some personal experiences of being in places. So we had some sort of common settings that were real. York Minster, the Shambles. Then we had other settings that we created. We had 3 or 4 scenes that anyone could use where we had created those settings. The house that they lived in was based on an actual house in York. And so we had the floor plan. The assembly hall where they held their ball was another, the races. And writers didn't have to use those, but if they did, they had a written description to draw on. So that, I think, that helped to, as you say, anchor it.
And that's it. And lovely to explore another popular part of Regency England that I don't think gets quite enough love. I mean, everybody is familiar with Bath and London, maybe Brighton if they're very close to Prinny, but to go further north to York, which has such a magnificent history.
And we decided early on that it would not be London, because London would be out of the means of these sisters. But you may remember the discussion that the 9 of us had as to whether it could be Brighton, Cheltenham. I can't remember who first suggested York, but I loved the idea. I thought it had such possibilities, but something very unusual. I've never seen a book set during the season in Lent. In York, I mean, during the season in York. Yeah. Yes, and, so that was great.
And learning that the season was different times of year, depending on where you were. So I think certain young ladies and young gentlemen who may not have been fortunate enough to make a match in one can sort of follow the calendar around.
Yes, indeed. I was aware, because I knew that Cheltenham had a summer season, and so that was Brighton too had a summer season. So yes, you can, and those towns were more accessible for the people who weren't perhaps the highest of the high ton.
And because you'd have local squires, people who were very important in their communities, but as you say, weren't up at that upper echelon.
Yes, and so there's a lot more to the Regency upper class than the London season.
Very, very much. Now, tell us about your well, I was about to say it's a new title, but it's not exactly new, and that's your Paradise series.
Indeed, I've written the final novella in a collection of 3 little books that I've had in mind since I started the Return of the Mountain King series. The first novella was Paradise Regained, which was part of the Bluestocking Bells set, Follow Your Star Home, some time ago. And then there were 4 novels about the sons of the hero of Paradise Regained. Over time, I collected a whole lot of vignettes I'd written for my blog and for the Tea Time Tatler, which is a Bluestocking Bells, the Bluestocking Bells blog, into a set called Paradise at Last. So Paradise Regained tells of James Winderfield, who has been exiled from London for the crime of loving someone who was wanted as wife by a powerful duke. Paradise at Last is about that duchess and the fairly miserable life she had, but how she made her peace with it and built her own areas of power and strength and happiness. And then Paradise at Last is set after the end of the last novel in the series, The Return of the Mountain King. And it's about James and Eleanor coming back together and overcoming some difficulties between them and finally being married. So I had a review that made me giggle this week about someone who suggested that James, by Paradise at Last, must have been at least 52 and was far too old for the activity he got up to. He was 63, and I can assure you he was not too old.
Isn't it funny how some readers get strangely possessive of an author's characters and determine you can't do that, or you know, for whatever reason. But I think that goes to the strength of your storytelling and your characterizations, that they are so real that it sort of somebody feels assured that they can go, well, he wouldn't do that. Sort of, well, yeah,
well, I can't help
because he's
but feel
my
that,
character, and
I can't help but feel that we're talking about a young person and who fell in love with the young James and was really quite distressed by the fact that he was still quite a hunk when he was 30 years older.
Youth is wasted on the young. What can we say?
I know, right? But yeah, that's I quite clearly reached her ick factor, so that's fine. Just thought, yeah. But given that I'm 72, I think he is young.
Well, yeah. I mean, the old turn phrase is old is 15 years older than you are, which is
That's
great,
true.
because that
is absolutely
moving.
True. It does keep moving. Yes, absolutely.
and to be able to create essentially two full romances, but covering the tragedy of the loss of James's wife.
Yes.
Really brings a complexity and a truth to life that I know when I first started, it sort of happily ever after meant the characters were an aspect, and they were young and beautiful and love, and nothing bad ever happened to them ever again. But the truth is that life isn't like that.
And there are authors who write those kind of stories, and more power to them and to the readers who like those kind of stories, but those aren't mine. My characters' happy endings are new beginnings.
Well, isn't that the optimism that the romance genre as a whole offers? That there is a happiness, but there's a hope. There's ongoing sort of adventures and life and love, sort of. But as readers, we're privileged to have this moment in time with them, and
indeed,
that's unless it's a full multi-generational sort of family saga that spans multiple generations. Generally, that's we just get one moment in time with them.
We do, and I was conscious that having made people love Marzad, James's first wife, I needed to deal delicately with the fact that I then killed her off. But because definitely didn't do it on the page. It had happened years before he came back to England.
Yes.
And he was in love with her, and he loved her dearly, and I never let that go. It seems to me to be, I mean, it's perfectly valid to have a hero who did not love or didn't even respect his first wife. That's a different storyline.
Yeah.
But a hero who does love his first wife is still available to love a second one. The heart is a big thing.
It is. It is. And if you can hear voices, noises behind me, it's my two cats just being cats. Anyway. And I hear exactly what you're saying. I had fun exploring that. I enjoyed exploring that with Jonathan Afua, the hero of Shadow of the Corsairs, and
absolutely
and going through that mourning process to then be able to draw on sort of the love that and the heart that was given fully, being able to heal, to be able to love again is a powerful reality.
I suspect that in many cases, having loved once, you are better able to love again if that love has been returned the first time.
Yes.
That if you have loved and been hurt, it's harder to open your heart.
Very, very true. Very, very true.
So that's also quite a common storyline, but it's a different storyline, and none the worse for it.
Yes. The full breadth of human experience.
Yeah, indeed. And as you say, we're about optimism. Our job is to stop the story when things look grand.
Yes.
Not when they looked gloomy.
Now, all of my favorite authors are now Dragonblade authors. How's that?
Isn't that
Congratulations on your new series being picked up by Dragonblade.
Thank you very much, and to you. Isn't that great? It's very exciting. Mine is a set of reverse fairy tales, no magical elements, but purely the plot lines are taken from fairy tables and then reversed so that we have
a Cinderfella,
the female, we have a Cinderfella. He is called Ash, actually. His name is Ashby, but his stepbrothers called him Ash Boy because they made him collect the ashes. So yes, so I'm writing that one at the moment. I'm about a third of the way, and that's the second story. It's called One Perfect Dance.
That is fantastic. I am looking forward to seeing the covers, because Dragonblade covers
I am excited to see the covers. I am excited. The first one, Lady Beast's Bridegroom, is due back from beta today or tomorrow, and due to Dragonblade at the end of this month. And I don't have to tell you which fairy tale that relates to, but
it's going to be interesting, that one.
I really enjoyed writing a heroine who was truly ugly in appearance, not in character.
Yeah.
And she had been badly burnt in a fire. She'd lost her eye, and her face was horribly scarred, or half of it. So creating a hero for her, the one comment that may require some rewriting that I've had back from beta readers is that I have made her hero too perfect. So
that's always a challenge, isn't it? It's sort of
Yeah.
rounding that character. Yes, sort of to
He needs a
love
four,
somebody as they are.
as they are. Yes, and he does, and he doesn't expect to. So I'm thinking I might work a little more on the fact that he doesn't expect to, because he has good reason to be suspicious of love. So I think I've got a little bit of room there.
Yes, absolutely. Because I mean, I've always addressed it is there's a meeting of minds before there's a meeting of bodies. That there's got to be. No, there doesn't have to be. I prefer when there is a spark beyond physical attraction, and you've underscored that specifically
Yes.
in this particular story, because physical attraction is not necessarily, well, it isn't the spark moment. So there's got to be something else that transcends physical beauty, because, well, youth and beauty fade inevitably anyway. So
They do.
who is the real person that your characters are falling in love with? The gravitas you bring to your stories, the depth is something I savor with each one.
Thank you, and I can say the same, Elizabeth. I love the psychology behind your people. I mean, they behave like people.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
And that's and I do agree with you. I find a story troubling when people are consumed by lust, especially if it's meant to be a historical book, where they're consumed by lust and in bed within 2 or 3 meetings, and then find out that they're in love.
Well,
afterwards,
and this,
that's not my kind of story. Although I have written several books in which people have been married either against their will or under pressure from others, and have consummated the marriage.
I think
even though they hardly know one another, and I find that an interesting, because I find it an interesting situation.
Well, this is it. I think a lot of people don't appreciate that the sexual freedom that we enjoy in the latter half of the 20th century and into the 21st, it was not available or carried inordinate risks in previous centuries.
Yes.
There was no reliable birth control. There was no reliable way of dealing with STDs. Up until the beginning of the 20th century, the leading cause of death in women was childbirth. So sex was risky.
1 in every 5 pregnancies ended in death for the mother.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
That's high. That's very high.
So sort of women guarding their chastity is not just about some old-fashioned or even a hatred of sex. Basically, who you choose to give yourself to had life and death consequences. So even if you didn't die in childbirth, you needed to be married to somebody reliable who could provide for you, because child rearing was all consuming, because we didn't have child monitors or daycare in the way we understand it, that access to sort of health and medicine to overcome childhood diseases, which and all of these things that make historical romance just a touch more fantasy than perhaps other romance genres.
but they don't need to be, because I think if you bring a bit of that reality into it, if you have, I had my villain over a number of books. My Duchess's husband died in a state of madness of syphilis.
Oh yes, yeah, and that really,
and these things are true. Rakes were not nice people.
No, they were not just the bad boys. They were seriously dangerous.
Absolutely, mad, bad, and dangerous to know, as they said of Lord Byron. But there are a number of romance writers. Many of my favorite romance writers deal with history, and by that I don't mean dates and famous events, but historical realities. And I find that much more satisfying than a 21st century couple in costume. But that's not to throw off at what other people read, because we're all different, and that's fine too.
And this is it, and there is definite scope for complete escapist fare, because
absolutely,
because sometimes you just want to dive away into another reality,
and why not? Absolutely.
Which brings me to of course, the 1960s TV series The Avengers. There was one that we watched with the recently late Peter Bowles, called Escape in Time, and that was absolutely fascinating. Peter Bowles was the baddie. He had a family pile that goes back centuries, and he was offering 20th century villains a chance to escape to another era, for half of their ill-gotten gains, and to give them a foretaste of that. He sends them through this room, and ends up being sort of disorienting lights and a bit of sleeping gas. They would awaken in a period set room with costumes and characters they could interact with, and then they'd sign on the dotted line and go back in time, and they didn't appear again. And Peter Bowles played his ancestors in these period rooms with such schizophrenic intensity, with different character personalities. It was such a lark. It was really really well done.
Oh, that sounds fabulous. I've missed that one. So that. It really does sound great. It sounds a little like the story of the man who arrived at the pearly gates, and St. Peter said to him, "Look, we've got a bit of a problem. You're not on our list." He said, "So we're not quite sure whether you're meant to go up or whether you're meant to go down. And so we thought what we'd do is we'd offer you a choice. You can spend a day in heaven, and then you can spend a day in hell." Well, he went into heaven and he walked around and he saw all the people playing their harps and having quiet conversation. And he thought, oh, well, he said, this is quite pleasant. And then he went down to hell, and it was one big party. There were girls, and there was drink, and there were all kinds of frantic activity going on. And so when the day was over, he said to St. Peter, "I'm going to go to hell." Turned up down in hell, and there were fires, and there were pitchforks, and there was hard labor. And he said, "What happened to the party?" "Oh," said the devil, "that was just the demo tape."
I love it. Jude, it's been a delight to talk to you, and I know I say that every time I talk to you, but it's absolutely true.
It's lovely talking to you too.
Thank you very much. And everyone, thank you for joining us for another conversation with Elizabeth Ellen Carter. Check the links below. We'll have details on Desperate Daughters and Jude's Paradise series there, so be sure to check them out.